Tel Aviv District, Herzliya Pitwalk, 14th of May, 2008, 07:46 a.m. A young woman waters a succulent on her balcony, adjusting her phone to mute. Below, traffic thickens toward a gray, unmarked complex at the edge of Karen Mossad Street. Inside, rows of servers hum under fluorescent light. In a classified memo later released by the State Archives, NSA Israel Joint Cyber Project 2009, the site is coded as Facility 8202, Women's Signals Division. She watches her reflection in the window, not the street, a reflex learned during surveillance drills. 3 years later, a worm named Stuxnet will appear in Iran's Natanz network. No one will speak of the balcony or the woman again. The succulent died that summer, the soil too dry from air-conditioned nights. She never replaced it. In late 2001, while the Second Intifada raged and suicide bombings punctuated Israeli cities with grief, the IDF expanded its Elite Signals Intelligence Division, Unit 8200. Officially a military intelligence branch tasked with electronic surveillance and code breaking, it was quietly building something else, a cyber warfare arm through targeted university recruitment. Interviews happened in campus libraries, conducted by civilian-dressed officers who never mentioned their rank. Tamar K., age 19, a computer science student at Technion in Haifa, was told during her interview that she'd be writing code to save lives. The phrase felt abstract, almost gentle. Her acceptance memo arrived 3 weeks later, printed on plain paper. Posting: 8202, Network Analysis Laboratory, Glilat. She searched for the location on military maps. The building was absent. Her first day began with coffee at 6 in the morning, a bus ride north from Tel Aviv, and a badge swipe through a door with no signage. Inside, the walls were beige, the lighting industrial. She learned to erase browser logs before leaving her terminal, encrypt personal notes, and answer family questions with rehearsed vagueness. "It's just a research job," she told her mother. "Government funded, nothing exciting." The routine became her legend. Morning coffee, silent commute, badge swipe, evening return, repeat. Her life compressed into a cycle of ordinary gestures that masked extraordinary purpose. In a 2014 memoir fragment published anonymously by a former 8200 member, one line stood out: "Patriotism thrives best in anonymity. What feels like duty eventually becomes a disguise." Tamar understood this early. The building at Glelo had no flag, no emblem, no acknowledgement of what occurred inside. It was a place that existed only in classified routing codes and encrypted emails. By 2005, network traffic logs showed digital contacts between Glilo and Langley, Virginia, the headquarters of the CIA. The collaboration was never formally announced. It didn't need to be. The servers knew. The Glilot camp, located several kilometers north of Tel Aviv, was shared between the IDF's Unit 8200 and Mossad's SIGINT liaison cell. Satellite images available through commercial providers blurred the compound to gray blocks. Analysts later noted that the blurring was consistent with Israeli defense protocols for sensitive sites. Inside, rows of IBM P-Series machines and Sunfire V490 servers were linked through air-gapped switches, isolated networks that could not be accessed from the outside internet. The hum was constant, a mechanical breathing that filled the rooms even when operators were absent. A declassified 2016 NSA training slide, presented at the Five Eyes Joint SIGINT Symposium in Canberra, listed Glilat as partner site, data harvest. The designation was clinical, bureaucratic. It meant that intelligence gathered there was shared with the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand under cooperative agreements that predated the Internet itself. Operatives who worked there called it the lab that breathes. No signs marked the entrance. No flags identified the nation it served. A commuter parking lot, unremarkable and overlooked, disguised the main entry point. Contractors delivering equipment were logged, but rarely asked questions. Tamar kept a routine that broke protocol. She fed a stray cat behind the north fence. Gray fur, one torn ear. It appeared in the autumn of 2006 and returned every morning. She brought scraps from the cafeteria, leaving them near a drainage grate. The cat never approached her directly, maintaining distance even as it ate. The presence of the animal became her only uncontrolled habit, a small rebellion against the sterile precision of her work. In a classified psychological evaluation conducted in 2009, one assessor noted, "Subject exhibits attachment to routines outside operational parameters. Assess for compartmentalization effectiveness." The fence behind which she fed the cat would later be identified in investigative journalism as the perimeter through which contractor vehicles departed carrying USB drives embedded with malware. The connection was never proven, only suggested through archived photographs and delivery schedules released years after the operation concluded. Domestication, one former operative later reflected, was a cover story they told themselves. The routines, feeding cats, watering plants, driving the same routes, created the illusion of normalcy in a place designed to disrupt the infrastructure of foreign nations. The cat disappeared in 2008. Tamar never learned whether it died, moved, or was removed for security reasons. Unit 8200 operatives built legends through fabricated digital identities and university fronts. Tamar and two colleagues, Lior S. and Mikal R., were registered as employees of a fictional startup called Negev Data Systems Limited. The shell company's LinkedIn page was maintained by the IDF Information Security Directorate. It listed office locations in Beersheba and Haifa, neither of which existed. The company profile described data analytics services for logistics firms. Endorsements came from other fictitious employees. Routine blurred with reality. They filed taxes under fake employers and received automated emails from handlers posing as HR representatives. Performance reviews arrived annually, written in corporate language, exceeded expectations in data optimization protocols. Tamar kept a copy in her apartment, next to actual university transcripts. She sometimes couldn't remember which employment history was real. In a 2013 interview, conducted after her discharge, Lior said, "We couldn't remember which stories were true. My cover employer gave me a retirement package. I almost cashed the check before realizing it was fake money from a fake company for a fake job." The construction of parallel lives served operational security, but it also created psychological fractures. Operatives attended weddings and family gatherings where they lied reflexively about their work. Some maintained the lies even after discharge, fearing exposure or simply unable to reconstruct their actual biographies. In 2006, their unit designation vanished from the Defense Registry. Documents previously filed under 8202 Network Analysis Laboratory were reclassified or destroyed. Employment records were sealed. When journalists later attempted to verify the existence of certain personnel through Freedom of Information requests, they received responses stating, "No such unit exists in accessible records." Tamar attended a cousin's wedding that year. When asked what she did for a living, she answered automatically, Data systems analyst for a startup in Beersheba. Her cousin asked which one. Tamar said the name. Her cousin nodded, uninterested. The conversation moved to other topics. The lie held because no one cared enough to investigate. Legends, one training manual explained, age faster than people. A cover story built in 2002 becomes outdated by 2008. Technology changes. Industries shift. An operative pretending to work in web hosting must update their knowledge of server configurations, cloud architecture, and industry jargon to maintain believability. The operational burden of maintaining a false identity often exceeded the burden of the actual intelligence work. In her apartment, Tamar kept 2 sets of business cards, one for her cover employer, one she never printed. By 2006, U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies shared escalating concern over Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment facility, located approximately 200 kilometers south of Tehran. Satellite reconnaissance images and UN IAEA inspection reports documented the installation of 19,000 centrifuges in underground cascade halls. The enrichment process, if left unchecked, could produce weapons-grade uranium within years. Israel's political leadership sought delay without open military conflict. Airstrikes would trigger regional war. Sabotage required human infiltration that was deemed too risky. A third option emerged from classified briefings between NSA and Unit 8200 leadership, a cyber weapon designed to physically destroy centrifuges while leaving no visible evidence of external attack. The joint project was codenamed the Olympic Games. It began under the NSA's Tailored Access Operations Unit and Unit 8200's Malware Division, both operating under strict compartmentalization protocols. Only a small number of personnel knew the target. Others worked on discrete components without understanding their ultimate purpose. Target: Siemens Step 7, Programmable Logic Controllers, PLCs, inside Natanz's cascade halls. These industrial devices regulated centrifuge speed, temperature, and pressure. If compromised, they could be instructed to destroy the machines they controlled. Declassified NSA slides later revealed that the operation relied on a vulnerability in Siemens software widely used in industrial control systems worldwide. The vulnerability had existed for years, unpatched and undisclosed. Exploiting it meant creating a worm capable of spreading through networks, identifying specific target hardware, and executing sabotage commands, all while remaining undetected. In a 2011 Symantec technical analysis of Stuxnet, researchers concluded the sophistication of the attack suggests nation-state involvement. The code exhibited knowledge of industrial systems that only a limited number of intelligence organizations possess. The enemy's infrastructure was more accessible than its intentions. Iranian nuclear engineers operated equipment purchased from European firms. Contractor companies provided maintenance. Supply chains offered entry points. The digital weapon could travel through trusted channels, embedded in firmware updates, or carried on USB drives by unwitting technicians. Stuxnet's first test server went live in a Glilat lab on 12th of April 2007. The simulation replicated Natanz's control environment using decommissioned Siemens hardware. Operators watched as the worm identified its target, injected false data, and initiated controlled equipment failure. On screen, the test succeeded. In the lab, no alarm sounded. The attack was invisible to operators monitoring the system. One engineer present during the test later stated in an anonymous interview, "We knew it worked. We didn't know if it would stay silent long enough to matter. Inside Glilet Building 4, Room 213, 6 workstations handled simulation of industrial control systems. The room was climate controlled to prevent dust accumulation on sensitive equipment. Air filters ran continuously, producing a low mechanical hum that became background noise for operators spending 12-hour shifts testing code variations. A log entry dated 3 June 2007 records. Test run number 12. RPM oscillation achieved. Duration, 47 seconds before automatic shutdown. Witnesses, Tamar K., Mikal R., one liaison from Langley. Name redacted. They ran loop cycles of centrifuge simulations, each iteration designed to stress bearings and induce mechanical failure without triggering alarms. The software adjusted rotor speeds in precise increments, fast enough to cause damage, slow enough to appear as normal operational variants. When the first test produced the high-pitched metallic whine of failing bearings, someone in the room laughed nervously. The laughter stopped immediately. No one spoke for several minutes. Tamar later described the moment in a classified debrief. "We heard the sound a centrifuge makes when it dies. It's not an explosion. It's a grinding, a whine that gets higher until it stops. Then silence. We knew what that sound would mean in Natanz." The psychological weight of the work was rarely discussed. Operators focused on technical precision, adjusting code, testing parameters, documenting results. The fact that each successful test represented potential destruction of Iranian nuclear infrastructure was understood but not articulated. Conversations remained procedural. Coffee breaks were silent. Room 213 had no windows. Fluorescent lights stayed on regardless of time. Operators lost track of whether it was day or night. Some brought watches. Others relied on the cafeteria schedule to mark passing hours. 5 months after the successful test, Iranian nuclear engineers filed an internal complaint with the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran regarding mysterious vibration anomalies in centrifuge cascades at Natanz. The report, later obtained through intelligence channels and partially declassified in 2013, stated, "Equipment exhibits rotational inconsistencies not attributable to mechanical defect or operator error. The frequency of occurrence is increasing." The complaint was classified as a routine maintenance concern. No sabotage was suspected. Iranian security protocols focused on physical infiltration and external threats, not on software vulnerabilities embedded in legitimate industrial control systems. In Glilet, the intelligence intercept was circulated among operational staff. The vibration anomalies matched the simulation data from Room 213. The worm was working. The confirmation was documented in a 2-line memo. Target exhibits expected behavior. Proceed to the next phase. Tamar read the memo on her screen, then deleted it as protocol required. The cat was waiting by the fence when she left that evening. She fed it the last of her sandwich. The animal ate, then disappeared into the shadows beyond the perimeter lighting. No one died in Room 213, yet the feeling persisted that something had burned, that a line had been crossed between defensive research and offensive action. The distinction mattered to some operators, less so to others. Unit 8200's operators monitored the worm's spread through multiple injection routes. The primary vector involved USB drives used by contractors employed by Bepaju Co., an Iranian engineering firm that provided maintenance services for industrial facilities, including Natanz. The Ekcho drives were infected through supply chain compromise, a method that introduced malware into legitimate hardware before it reached end users. Field reports from CIA assets stationed in Dubai confirmed that one infected drive was lost in transit during a routine equipment delivery. The drive became patient zero, introducing Stuxnet into Natanz's air-gapped network through physical contact rather than internet connection. The worm was designed to spread laterally across networks, seeking Siemens PLCs while remaining dormant in systems that did not match its target profile. Declassified German press archives, specifically reports from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, published in 2011, later traced code fragments recovered from infected systems to IP address ranges registered to IDF networks. The attribution was circumstantial, but consistent with patterns of Israeli cyber operations documented in other contexts. Tamer's role involved monitoring infection spread through encrypted telemetry data transmitted by the worm itself. Each time the malware encountered a new network, it sent a brief, coded signal back to collection servers operated jointly by NSA and Unit 8200. The signals did not contain operational intelligence, only confirmation of presence and target identification status. On her screen, a map displayed infection clusters as small red dots. Most appeared in Iran, concentrated around Tehran and Isfahan. Some spread to India, Indonesia, and Russia. Collateral infections in systems that shared components with the intended target. The worm was programmed to remain dormant in non-target environments, but its presence created forensic evidence that would later allow cybersecurity researchers to reconstruct its behavior. By mid-2009, intelligence assessments indicated that approximately 20% of Iran's centrifuges at Natanz had been taken offline for maintenance or replacement. The failures were attributed by Iranian engineers to mechanical defects, supply chain issues, and operational stress. No official acknowledgement of sabotage appeared in Iranian government statements. In Glilo, analysts reviewed the data with clinical detachment. The operation was successful. No bombs had fallen. No soldiers had crossed borders. The weapon was syntax, lines of code executed in silence, producing physical destruction without visible attack. Tamar saved none of the data. Protocol required that all telemetry be stored on secure servers with access limited to authorized personnel. At the end of each shift, she logged out, cleared her terminal, and walked to the parking lot where her car waited among dozens of identical vehicles. The invisible nature of the strike created operational ambiguity. Success was measured in equipment failure rates and diplomatic delays, not in territory gained or enemies killed. The aftermath would be written by journalists and historians, not by the operators who executed the mission. Every invisible strike leaves a visible shadow. The shadow appeared years later in leaked NSA documents, journalistic investigations, and technical analyses published by cybersecurity firms. The operation that was meant to remain secret became one of the most documented cyber attacks in history. July 2008. At Ben Gurion Airport, a contractor team from a front company called Limor Industrial Control Ltd. departed for Vienna to deliver Siemens PLCs designated for testing at the IAEA training center. The shipment consisted of 4 units, 2 of which carried embedded firmware alterations authored at Glilut. Cargo Manifest ID AR2118. The shipment was logged as calibration equipment for IAEA technical demonstration. Handlers used the phrase package sent for calibration in internal communications. The phrase appeared in 15 separate emails between July and September 2008, each time referring to staged deliveries of modified hardware. Tamar monitored the tracking logs from her workstation in Building 4. A green progress bar advanced across her screen as the shipment moved through customs, air freight, and ground transport. Each checkpoint confirmation appeared as a timestamp. The visual resembled a heartbeat monitor, steady, rhythmic, advancing toward its destination. The operation relied on exploiting the trust inherent in international nuclear oversight. The IAEA facility in Vienna conducted legitimate equipment testing for member states, including Iran. Iranian technicians attended training sessions, handled demonstration hardware, and returned home with knowledge, and occasionally with USB drives or firmware updates that had been subtly compromised. The method was documented in a 2012 Washington Post investigation citing anonymous intelligence sources. The strategy involved embedding malicious code in equipment that would eventually be transported to Iran through legitimate commercial and diplomatic channels. The weapon traveled inside trusted systems. No bullet, no drone, just syntax as a weapon. The code was dormant until it encountered its specific target environment. On systems that did not match the target profile, it remained inert, undetectable. The precision was necessary to avoid unintended consequences and maintain deniability. The tracking logs showed the shipment arriving at Vienna International Airport on 23 July 2008. Ground transport to the IAEA facility occurred the following day. Tamar watched the final confirmation appear. Delivery complete. Equipment received and logged. She closed the tracking window and opened the next task in her queue. Around her, colleagues worked in similar silence. Conversations were minimal, technical. The cafeteria served lunch at noon. She ate a sandwich, drank water, and returned to her terminal. The payload reached Natanz on 4 November 2008, according to later intelligence assessments pieced together from intercepts and contractor movement logs. The exact mechanism of delivery remains partially classified, but multiple sources confirm that infected USB drives were introduced into Natanz's network through contractor maintenance activities during that period. In the Glilat Operations Center, the confirmation appeared as a telemetry signal. Target environment detected. Execution authorized. The signal was brief, encrypted, routed through multiple relay points to obscure origin. Operators logged the data and continued their shifts. Tamar left the building that evening at 18:30, the same time as always. Traffic on the highway back to Tel Aviv was heavy. She listened to the radio, news in Hebrew, and the weather forecast calling for clear skies. At home, she made tea and sat on the balcony. The succulent needed water. She filled the watering can. In June 2010, a Belarusian cybersecurity firm called Virus Blockada reported a worm causing Windows crashes in several Iranian client systems. The file name, WTR4132-TMP. The designation meant nothing to most analysts. To specialists in malware forensics, the file's behavior was extraordinary. It exploited 4 zero-day vulnerabilities simultaneously, a level of sophistication rarely seen outside of nation-state development. The worm, Stuxnet, escaped into the wild. Emergency encrypted communications between NSA Fort Meade and Unit 8200 Glilat logged escalating concern. A declassified memo released in August 2011 through Freedom of Information Act request quoted an anonymous Israeli intelligence officer. We lost containment. The weapon is visible. The concern was strategic, not ethical. The worm's exposure meant that defensive cybersecurity researchers worldwide would begin reverse engineering its code, identifying its targets, and attributing its origin. The operational advantage of stealth had been lost. Deniability became harder to maintain. Tamar was in the cafeteria when the news reached operational staff. An email marked Priority, immediate action required, appeared on terminals across Building 4. She was stirring her coffee when the notification sound chimed. The coffee had gone cold. She kept stirring anyway, watching the liquid circle the cup. The directive was brief. Cease all external communications. Delete non-essential project files. Await further instructions. Around her, colleagues read the same message. Some stood and left immediately. Others remained seated, staring at screens. The cafeteria emptied within minutes. Tamar stayed, finishing her coffee. When she returned to her workstation, a second email waited. Mandatory debrief scheduled. Report to Security Office, Building 2. By nightfall, journalists in Moscow, Berlin, and Washington were writing articles about a cyber superweapon discovered in Iranian systems. The coverage varied in accuracy, but converged on one conclusion. The malware exhibited capabilities consistent with state-sponsored cyber warfare. Speculation about Israeli and American involvement appeared in multiple reports based on technical analysis of the worm's target, profile, and code sophistication. In Tel Aviv, the Prime Minister's office issued a one-line statement. Israel does not comment on foreign press speculation regarding security matters. The statement was repeated verbatim for weeks. Tamar's debrief lasted 40 minutes. She answered questions about operational security, external contacts, and personal communications. The interviewer was polite, methodical. No accusations, only confirmations. At the end, she was told, "Your work has been exemplary. We appreciate your discretion." She returned home past midnight. The balcony door was open, the curtain moving slightly in the breeze. The succulent on the railing looked wilted. She touched the soil, dry, cracked. She filled the watering can, but hesitated. The plant seemed beyond saving. The loss of containment meant that the operation's existence was now public knowledge. Success had been achieved. Centrifuges destroyed. Iranian nuclear program delayed. But secrecy had failed. The weapon that was supposed to remain invisible had become the most analyzed piece of malware in history. In the weeks that followed, cybersecurity conferences featured presentations on Stuxnet's architecture. Academic papers dissected its code. Defense contractors studied its methods for future application. The worm that traveled in silence became a case study in textbooks. Control, as the operation demonstrated, is a temporary illusion. Israel maintained official silence. On 29 June 2010, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed his cabinet in a closed session. The official minutes, partially released years later, recorded his statement. Technological innovation is our defense. We will not elaborate on methods or operations. No names, no admission, no acknowledgement of Unit 8200 or Glilot. The statement was calculated ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying involvement, while suggesting capability. Foreign intelligence agencies and journalists interpreted it as indirect confirmation. The silence itself became evidence. Meanwhile, NSA liaison teams at Fort Meade initiated damage control protocols. Joint operational references to Unit 8200 were scrubbed from accessible internal files. Email chains were reclassified. Personnel rosters were updated to remove collaboration records. The digital evidence of partnership was methodically erased from systems that might be subject to oversight or leaks. Tamar and her colleagues received new directives via encrypted channels. Cease contact with foreign addresses, delete years of project-related emails, and remove personal devices from secure facilities. The order was framed as a routine security review, but its urgency suggested deeper concern. Tamar spent an afternoon deleting emails, conversations with Langley-based counterparts, technical discussions with NSA cryptographers, coordination messages about equipment testing, all compressed into trash bins and permanently erased. Each deletion felt like erasing memory, collapsing years of collaboration into empty space. Some correspondence was personal in tone. "Good work on the Vienna shipment," one message read. Another, "Looking forward to next week's simulation results." The messages were mundane, professional, but their accumulation represented relationships built over years of shared classified work. She deleted them without rereading. Secrecy consumes its authors first. The operatives who built the weapon, tested it, deployed it, and monitored its success would never be publicly acknowledged. Their work would be attributed to anonymous intelligence sources or security officials in newspaper articles. Their names would remain classified until long after their retirements or deaths. On 1st July 2010, Tamar received a brief email from the Information Security Directorate. "Your security clearance has been revoked pending review. Report to administration for credential return." No explanation, no meeting, no context. She reported the next morning to Building 1. A clerk collected her badge, access cards, and building keys. The process took 10 minutes. She signed a form acknowledging the return of classified materials. The clerk asked no questions. She left the Glylote facility for the last time at 09:30, walking through the parking lot toward her car. The sky was overcast, the air humid. Behind the north fence, she looked for the stray cat but saw nothing. The drainage grate where she had left food scraps was empty. Traffic on the highway moved slowly. She merged into the southbound lanes toward Tel Aviv, joining the commute she had made for 9 years. The routine remained, but the destination had changed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michal. "They pulled my clearance too. Are you okay?" Tamar didn't respond immediately. She drove in silence, exiting near Ramat Aviv. At home, she made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The succulent on the balcony was dead, the leaves brown and brittle. In June 2012, journalist David Sanger of the New York Times published "Obama Order Sped Up Wave of Cyber Attacks Against Iran," a detailed investigation based on interviews with current and former American, European, and Israeli intelligence officials. The article confirmed that Stuxnet was a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, codenamed Olympic Games, initiated under President George W. Bush and accelerated under President Obama. Sources described in the article confirmed Israel's involvement through Unit 8200 and its collaboration with NSA's tailored access operations. The article referenced Glylo indirectly through satellite images that showed a complex north of Tel Aviv associated with signals intelligence operations. Tamar, now working at a private cybersecurity startup in Tel Aviv, watched a press conference about the article on her office computer, volume muted. Colleagues around her continued their work, unaware of the significance. On her desk sat a small succulent in a ceramic pot, its leaves green and healthy. It had been a gift from the company during her first week. She received a text from Michal. "They used our code again." The message referenced reports that Stuxnet-derived malware had been detected in systems across the Middle East and Europe. Variants of the worm, modified by other intelligence agencies or criminal groups, were spreading through industrial control systems worldwide. The weapon had escaped not just containment, but control entirely. Tamar responded, "I know." The article triggered parliamentary inquiries in multiple countries, debates about the legality of cyber warfare, and academic discussions about norms and deterrence in digital conflict. None of the discussions mentioned her name. None would. Ownership is the first casualty of covert success. The operators who designed and deployed the weapon would never receive public acknowledgement. Their contribution would remain classified, attributed generically to intelligence community efforts in historical assessments. In August 2012, Iran announced the formation of its own cyber defense unit under the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. The announcement was accompanied by warnings about retaliation against nations engaged in cyber aggression. Rhetoric escalated on both sides, while actual capabilities remained opaque. Tamar watched these developments from the outside, a former insider now observing the consequences of her work through news reports and leaked documents. The distance was disorienting. She knew details that journalists speculated about, understood technical mechanisms that analysts struggled to reconstruct. But her knowledge was locked behind non-disclosure agreements and classification rules that would remain in effect for decades. She watered the succulent on her desk, checking the soil moisture before pouring. The plant thrived in indirect sunlight, requiring minimal attention. She had learned the watering schedule through trial and error, adjusting frequency based on seasonal humidity changes. The previous succulent, the one on her balcony at home, had died from neglect during the months after her clearance was revoked. This one would not. During lunch breaks, she sometimes walked to a cafe near Ibn Gabirol Street, ordering the same coffee she had drunk in the Glilo cafeteria. The taste was different. Better beans, skilled barista, but the ritual remained. Some routines outlasted their original context. That summer, she deleted her LinkedIn profile associated with Negev Data Systems Labi Untid. The shell company still existed in registry records, but its purpose had expired. Post-2012, fragments of Stuxnet code appeared in malware families traced to Russian, Chinese, and North Korean state-sponsored hacking groups. The sophistication of the original weapon had been reverse-engineered, adapted, and weaponized by other nations. The techniques pioneered at Glilo, exploiting industrial control systems, using multiple zero-day vulnerabilities, propagating through air-gapped networks, became standard components of advanced persistent threat arsenals worldwide. Tamar consulted for a European bank on cyber defense strategies, reviewing network architectures and incident response protocols. During one assessment, she recognized attack patterns she had once authored. The malware variant targeting the bank's SCADA systems used rotational speed manipulation techniques identical to those developed in Room 213. She documented the finding in her report, omitting the personal recognition. A classified Mossad briefing dated March 2014, later partially disclosed through investigative journalism, admitted loss of exclusive capability regarding advanced cyber weapons. The assessment concluded, technological advantage in offensive cyber operations has been eroded through proliferation of Stuxnet-derived techniques. Attribution is increasingly difficult. Deterrence models require revision. Tamar read the leaked excerpts online, recognizing the institutional language. The briefing represented the formal acknowledgement of what had been obvious for years. The weapon had escaped into a commons where any sufficiently resourced actor could deploy variations. She deleted the browser tab after reading. The cat that used to wait behind the glylit fence was long gone, either dead or relocated by security personnel concerned about its presence near a classified facility. She sometimes thought about it while feeding a different stray near her apartment building, a tabby with white paws that appeared during winter months. The gesture of feeding carried no operational significance now, but the habit remained. In 2015, a copy of the Glylop building appeared on Google Maps, blurred by default security protocols, but visible enough to confirm location. User comments speculated about military use. No official statement clarified the site's purpose. Satellite imagery services updated their databases, replacing older low-resolution images with newer high-resolution captures showing vehicle parking patterns, rooftop installations, and perimeter fencing details. Tamar viewed the images once, noting changes since her departure. New buildings had been added. The north fence where she had fed the cat was reinforced with taller barriers. The parking lot was expanded. The facility had grown, adapted, and continued operations without her. No system stays clean after contact with power. The code she had written, the tests she had run, the operations she had monitored, all had produced consequences beyond their intended scope. The delayed Iranian nuclear program was a strategic success. The proliferation of cyber weapons to hostile actors was an unintended cost. Both outcomes were documented. Neither was reversible. She occasionally gave presentations at cybersecurity conferences, speaking in general terms about industrial control system vulnerabilities and defensive strategies. Audience members asked questions about Stuxnet. She answered factually, citing public research reports and technical analyses. She never mentioned Glylo, Room 213, or the sound of a failing centrifuge in a simulation test. Some buildings disappear only after their echo is complete. Former Unit 8200 members were summoned for routine psychological evaluation in late 2014. The directive arrived via email, requesting attendance at an appointment scheduled by the Defense Ministry's Personnel Health Division. The tone was administrative, not urgent. Tamar attended her session on a Tuesday afternoon. The office was located in a Tel Aviv high-rise, fifth-floor, unmarked door. The waiting room held 3 chairs and a table with outdated magazines. She waited 12 minutes. The evaluation consisted of a brief questionnaire and a short interview. Questions focused on sleep quality, stress levels, interpersonal relationships, and current employment satisfaction. The evaluator, a woman in her 50s, asked about loyalty to the state. Tamar answered affirmatively. The question felt rote, disconnected from the form she had completed. One section of the internal report, later leaked to investigative journalists, recorded, "Subject exhibits derealization episodes linked to dual identity maintenance. Recommended follow-up declined by subject. Status cleared for non-classified employment." Tamar admitted during the session that she still coded in her head before sleep, an automatic habit of mentally debugging problems while lying in darkness. The evaluator noted this without comment. The session lasted 10 minutes. The report was filed in her personnel record and sealed until 2045, following standard classification review timelines for intelligence personnel. By the time the record becomes accessible, most individuals mentioned will be deceased or elderly. 2 months after the evaluation, Tamar was found lecturing at Tel Aviv University's Computer Science Department under her cover identity. The course was Network Security Fundamentals, open to third-year undergraduate students. Her listed biography on the department website identified her as a consultant with 15 years of industry experience, formerly employed at Negev Data Systems Limited. The cover had outlived its operational necessity. The shell company still existed in official registries, its status listed as active, despite having no employees, revenue, or business operations. Maintaining the fiction required minimal effort: annual filings, registered address updates, occasional website maintenance. The IDF Information Security Directorate continued managing the cover as part of its broader portfolio of front companies used for operational security. Students in her course learned about firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and best practices for securing industrial control networks. She taught competently, using real-world case studies drawn from public breach reports. Stuxnet was mentioned in one lecture as an example of advanced persistent threats targeting critical infrastructure. She described its technical mechanisms without personal commentary. During office hours, a student asked whether she had worked in government security. She answered, briefly, years ago, nothing exciting. The student accepted the response and moved to the next question about homework assignments. Debrief, in the institutional sense, is a ritual of controlled forgetting. Operators are asked to recount events, document decisions, and assess outcomes. The debriefings are recorded, classified, and archived. Then the operators are expected to continue living as if the events never occurred, maintaining cover stories indefinitely while integrating back into civilian employment and social contexts where their actual work cannot be discussed. The psychological cost is documented but rarely treated. Tel Aviv, spring 2021. Morning light crosses a balcony near Herzliya Pituach. A succulent thrives in a ceramic pot, its leaves thick with stored water. Hands pour slowly, measuring the flow to avoid oversaturation. Proper drainage is essential. The previous plant died from retention, not neglect. In the distance, construction cranes rise where Glilit once stood, the site now leased to a tech incubator called Innovation Park North. Young entrepreneurs occupy the repurposed buildings, coding applications unaware of the previous tenant. The servers are gone, replaced by standing desks and coffee machines. An archival photograph appears on a laptop screen. Unit 8200 Operations Center, declassified 2020. The caption is clinical, the image heavily redacted. The camera holds on the balcony until the sound of servers fades into traffic, wave-like and constant. The watering can rest where a surveillance log once stood, a quiet exchange of purpose.